Ethan Sterling, the richest heir in America, had everything: money, power, a supermodel girlfriend who seemed perfect. But he doubted one fundamental thing. Was Madison's love real, or was she just interested in his fortune? So he devised an extreme plan that would shock everyone. With help from his personal doctor, he faked a terrible car accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. He wanted to see how Madison would react seeing him in a wheelchair, dependent on others' care, without the charm of power. But what happened in the following days left him stunned. While Madison showed her true colors, someone else in the mansion, a person he had always considered invisible, demonstrated such pure and selfless love that it forever changed his perspective on life. Who was this mysterious person who truly loved him for who he was? And how did she react when she discovered it was all an act? Ethan Sterling sat in his panoramic office on the 50th floor of the skyscraper, bearing his name in the heart of Manhattan, watching the city spread below him like a kingdom he ruled absolutely. At 29, he had inherited the Sterling family financial empire and tripled it in just 5 years, becoming the richest man under 30 in all of America. He had everything money could buy: a $50 million penthouse overlooking Central Park, a collection of sports cars that made museums envious, yachts, private jets, homes in every major city worldwide. And most importantly, he had Madison Hayes, the most photographed supermodel in America, his girlfriend for 2 years, whom every magazine described as the most beautiful and envied couple in the country. Yet on this September evening, as he watched Manhattan's lights come alive one by one, Ethan felt empty. A thought had tormented him for months, growing inside him like cancer devouring his peace. Did Madison truly love him, or was she only attracted to his wealth and the power he represented? The signs were subtle, but unmistakable. The way Madison lit up when he gave her expensive jewelry, but became distant during deep conversations. How she disappeared whenever he had difficult workdays, magically reappearing for social events. The fact that she was never interested in his thoughts, doubts, or fears, only the tangible benefits of their relationship. Ethan had observed all this with the same analytical sharpness he used in business, and the conclusion was bitter. He was in love with a woman who saw him only as a luxury ATM. But that evening, as he reflected on this painful reality, an idea began forming in his mind. A crazy, risky idea that could finally give him the definitive answer he sought. If Madison truly loved him, would she still do so when he was no longer the powerful, confident Ethan Sterling that the whole world admired? He picked up the phone and called Dr. Marcus Chen, his personal physician and one of the few true friends he had. Chen ran Manhattan's most exclusive private clinic and had known Ethan since childhood. When Chen arrived at the office an hour later, he found Ethan standing before the panoramic window, shoulders tense and gaze fixed in the void. "Ethan, you called urgently. What's wrong? Are you okay?" Ethan turned slowly, and Chen saw in his eyes a determination he'd never noticed before, mixed with a vulnerability that surprised him. "Marcus, I need your help with something particular. I want you to help me fake being paralyzed." The doctor remained silent for long seconds, convinced he'd misheard. "Sorry, what did you say?" Ethan approached his desk and sat down, looking his friend straight in the eyes. "I want to test Madison. I want to see if she really loves me, or if she's only interested in my money and status. If we pretended I had an accident and was paralyzed from the waist down, how would she react? Ethan, have you lost your mind? It's absurd, dangerous, cruel. It's the only thing that can give me the answer I'm looking for," Ethan interrupted firmly. "Marcus, you've known me since I was a kid. You know I've never been impulsive. But this thing is destroying me. I need to know if Madison loves me for who I am or for what I own." Chen stood up and began pacing the office, hands in his hair. "But Ethan, if she finds out it's all fake, then I'll know she at least tried." But if she runs away or treats me badly, thinking I'm really paralyzed, then I'll have my answer." The doctor looked at him for a long time, seeing in those eyes a deep pain that went beyond simple curiosity. It was the pain of a man who had everything but wasn't sure he'd ever been loved for himself. "And how do you plan to do this? You can't just sit in a wheelchair and say you're paralyzed. There are medical exams, tests." Ethan smiled for the first time that evening. "That's why I need you. You run Manhattan's most prestigious clinic. You could falsify some reports, say the accident caused spinal cord damage, but there's hope for recovery with specific therapies. It doesn't have to be permanent, just convincing." Chen shook his head, but Ethan could see he was starting to seriously consider the proposal. "It's insane. Absolutely insane. But doable." The doctor sighed deeply. "Technically, yes. We could say you had a car accident, spinal trauma, temporary paralysis of lower limbs. I could create false reports, say you're under observation in my private clinic. But Ethan, you need to think carefully. If this plan goes wrong—" "It won't go wrong," Ethan said with conviction. "And even if it did, at least I'd have the truth." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He walked through his Central Park penthouse, watching Madison sleep peacefully in their king-size bed, unaware of what was about to happen. She was beautiful even in sleep, with long auburn hair spread across silk pillows, and her perfect face relaxed in the dim light. The next day, everything was organized down to the smallest detail. Chen had prepared false medical documents, briefed 2 trusted nurses who would participate in the charade, and even had credible medical equipment installed in the penthouse's master bedroom. Ethan called Madison, who was in Los Angeles for a photo shoot, and told her he'd had a car accident while returning from a business meeting. His voice trembled as he invented the details. The car that had swerved to avoid an animal, the rollover, waking up in the hospital with legs that no longer responded. Madison's reaction was what he expected: shock, disbelief, promises to return immediately to New York. But Ethan, with his trained ear for reading people in business, noticed something in her voice. A pause too long before words of comfort, a hesitation that froze his blood. When Madison arrived at the penthouse that evening, Ethan was already on stage for his deception. Sitting in the wheelchair Chen had procured, wearing an open shirt showing fake bandages and an orthopedic collar, he awaited the moment of truth. The sound of Madison's Lamborghini in the building's garage made his heart beat harder than it ever had during billion-dollar negotiations. In the next few minutes, he would discover if the woman he loved was worthy of his love or had been the greatest disappointment of his life. And as he heard her heels approaching the door, Ethan Sterling didn't yet know that the real surprise wouldn't come from Madison, but from someone else who lived under his same roof and whom he had always considered practically invisible. Madison Hayes entered the penthouse like a star, walking a red carpet, despite the dramatic circumstances that should have made her worried and distraught. Her Louboutin heels echoed on the marble floor as she headed toward the living room where Ethan waited in his wheelchair. She wore a fire-red Armani suit that perfectly hugged her model curves, hair perfectly styled despite the urgent trip from Los Angeles, makeup flawless. A truly worried woman wouldn't have prepared herself like for a photo shoot. She threw herself at his feet with theatrical voice, but Ethan noticed she was careful not to ruin her outfit. When he explained that doctors spoke of months or years to recover, with the possibility he might never heal completely, he saw a shadow pass through Madison's eyes, a flash of disappointment so quick it was almost imperceptible. Madison's words sounded empty, spoken with automatism. She avoided looking him in the eyes, her gaze wandering around the room as if already thinking of something else. When Ethan mentioned he would need assistance for months, Madison hurried to say she would help him, but immediately began listing her already scheduled work commitments. Less than 24 hours after learning of his accident, she was already listing reasons why she couldn't stay by his side. The Dolce & Gabbana contract, the Bulgari campaign in Greece, the Paris fashion show. While Madison spoke, Ethan heard the discreet sound of someone in the next room. It was Sofia Rodriguez, the Hispanic housekeeper who had worked in the penthouse for 3 years. A 32-year-old woman, always silent and efficient, who went unnoticed. Average height, brown hair always pulled back, simple and practical clothes. Sofia entered with a tea tray, and Ethan truly looked at her for the first time in years. There was something in her dark eyes, genuine concern, that contrasted sharply with Madison's attitude. She arranged a cushion behind his back with caring and natural gestures. Madison watched the scene with evident impatience, excusing herself to make urgent calls to her agent. She left the room, leaving only a trail of expensive perfume and a feeling of emptiness. Sofia remained, silently tidying the room. Ethan asked her to stay a moment, confessing he needed company. For the first time in 3 years, they spoke as human beings instead of employer and employee. Sofia sat beside him naturally, listening when Ethan complained about feeling pathetic. She replied that she didn't think anything of the sort, that he was going through a very difficult time and needed people who truly cared about him. Those words hit Ethan harder than any declaration of love from Madison. There was a sincerity in Sofia he'd never noticed, an ability to see beyond the surface that touched him deeply. The following night, Madison slept in the guest room to avoid disturbing him. Ethan lay awake thinking about how his plan was already yielding unexpected results. Madison had shown her true face in less than 24 hours. Superficial, self-interested, incapable of genuine affection when situations became difficult. But the real revelation had been Sofia. In just a few hours of fake disability, that silent woman had shown more care and humanity than Madison had ever demonstrated. The next day, Madison left for Paris as planned, not hiding her relief at being able to escape the uncomfortable situation. Ethan watched her get in the Lamborghini, and for the first time in 2 years, felt no pain seeing her leave. What he didn't know was that Sofia, from the kitchen window, was watching the same scene with an expression of sadness and indignation that would have surprised anyone who noticed it. The days following Madison's departure revealed to Ethan a reality he had never noticed. While Madison sent sporadic messages with excuses to prolong her absence, Sofia became his constant presence, silent but indispensable. Every morning at 7 sharp, Sofia entered with breakfast prepared exactly as he liked. Scrambled eggs, double espresso, warm croissants, fresh orange juice. But it was the way she did it that struck him. Delicate, natural gestures, without any air of sacrifice or duty. Sofia had rough hands from work, but her movements were incredibly gentle. She helped him without making him feel inadequate, spoke with him without pity, still treated him like a complete person despite his apparent condition. One day, Ethan asked her why she had come to America. Sofia hesitated, then told him her younger sister had needed a very expensive heart operation. In Mexico, waiting lists were too long, so she came to New York where housekeepers earned more. The operation had succeeded 2 years earlier, and now Carmen was studying medicine in Mexico City to become a cardiac surgeon. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. This woman had sacrificed everything to save her sister, leaving her homeland, her family, caring for a rich stranger, and he had never noticed. In the following days, Ethan began noticing things about Sofia that had always been there. How she sang softly in Spanish while cleaning, how she read literature books during breaks, how she knew 3 languages perfectly and had a literature degree she'd never mentioned. On the 5th day, when Ethan faked back pain, Sofia didn't hesitate. She would sleep in the armchair in his room to assist him. That night, she never really slept, getting up every hour to check he was okay, adjusting his blankets, bringing him water without being asked. Around 3 in the morning, believing he was sleeping deeply, Sofia approached and gently arranged a lock of hair that had fallen on his forehead. Then she whispered so quietly he could barely hear, "Please, get better soon. I can't stand seeing you like this." In that phrase was such genuine pain, such pure affection, that Ethan had to clench his teeth not to react. Sofia loved him. Not his money, not his status, but him, Ethan, even when he was broken and dependent.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
The next morning, when Sofia brought breakfast with her usual gentle smile, Ethan looked at her with completely new eyes. This woman had spent 3 years caring for him with dedication beyond professional duty. When Ethan asked what she would do if he never fully recovered, Sofia looked him straight in the eyes with surprising intensity. She told him he was already perfect as he was, that disability doesn't define a person, that he was still Ethan Sterling, intelligent, kind, capable of making people laugh, generous. His legs had nothing to do with who he really was. And when Ethan asked if he needed assistance forever, Sofia answered without hesitation, "Then, I'll be here, forever." See, in that moment, Ethan understood he had found something he didn't even know he was looking for. Not just true love, but a person who saw him for who he really was, and loved him precisely for that. But what he didn't know was that Sofia had begun to suspect something, and that the truth, when it came to light, would bring consequences neither of them could imagine. Sofia Rodriguez wasn't stupid. She had a literature degree, spoke 4 languages, and most importantly had that feminine instinct that made her notice details others missed. And some details about Ethan's accident didn't convince her at all. First, Ethan was too fit for someone who had suffered severe spinal trauma. His leg muscles showed no signs of atrophy. Second, his reflexes were perfect. When she cleaned, Ethan instinctively pulled his feet back if there was risk of impact. Third, she had seen him move his toes while sleeping. But the detail that made her most suspicious was finding, while cleaning his study, medical documents casually left on the desk. Sofia had assisted her sister during her illness and knew medical terminology well. Those reports were too generic, as if written by someone not specialized in spinal trauma. On the 7th evening, Sofia made a decision. She waited for Ethan to fall asleep, then went down to his study. She knew the combination to the safe behind the Picasso painting, his mother's birth date. What she found left her breathless. There was a contract with Dr. Chen for unconventional medical consulting services. Emails between Ethan and the doctor talking about convincing staging and behavioral testing. Receipts for wheelchair rental and fake medical equipment. Sofia sat trembling in the chair, documents in her hands, feeling her world collapse. Everything was fake. The accident, the paralysis, her suffering seeing him like that. Ethan had orchestrated everything to test Madison. She had been just collateral damage, an involuntary witness to a cruel experiment. The most humiliating thing was that she had fallen in love with him precisely during that week of false care. She had spent sleepless nights worrying, had prayed for his recovery, had fantasized about an impossible future. Tears fell silently as she read the last document. A plan on how to gradually reveal the truth to minimize relational damage. Ethan had planned how to manipulate her even after deceiving her. Sofia put everything back, went to her room, and packed. She left a formal resignation letter on the kitchen desk, took her belongings, and called a taxi. It was 3 in the morning when she left the penthouse for the last time, silently closing the door. But Ethan wasn't sleeping. Guilt and growing awareness of his feelings for Sofia kept him awake. He heard the taxi leave and ran to the window just in time to see the lights disappear into the darkness. He found the empty room and the letter in the kitchen. A few formal resignation lines that broke his heart. At 8 in the morning, he called Dr. Chen in panic. Sofia had discovered everything and left. He had to find her. Chen told him maybe it was better that way, that the plan had gone too far. But Ethan shouted that he no longer cared about Madison. He had fallen in love with Sofia. That woman had loved him when she thought he was paralyzed, had cared for him as if he were the most important person in the world, and he had repaid her with the cruelest lie possible. Finding Sofia Rodriguez in a city of 8 million inhabitants without contacts proved more difficult than any financial operation Ethan had ever faced. And as days passed without news, he understood he had lost the most precious thing he'd ever had, just when he realized he couldn't live without it. Ethan discovered that being one of America's richest men meant nothing when what you wanted to find was a person who had every reason in the world to hide from you. Sofia had vanished from New York as if she'd never existed, and every day without finding her was torture. He immediately abandoned the paralysis charade, returning to walking normally, but ironically felt more paralyzed than before, paralyzed by remorse, by fear of having forever lost the woman he loved. He hired 3 private investigation agencies, placed ads in newspapers, checked every budget hotel in the city. But Sofia seemed to have evaporated. The only thing he discovered was that she had withdrawn all her savings, $23,000 saved over 3 years. On the 5th day, he received a call that froze him. Madison had returned from Paris, surprised to find him walking normally. Ethan had completely forgotten about her. The woman for whom he had orchestrated the charade now seemed insignificant to him. When Madison enthusiastically asked about going to the Hamptons as planned before the accident, without even asking how his week of paralysis had been, Ethan definitively understood her superficiality. He ended the relationship on the spot. That evening, completely alone in his penthouse, he had an idea. If he couldn't find Sofia directly, maybe he could find her through her sister Carmen, who was studying medicine in Mexico City. He used his influence to get information from Mexican universities. After 2 days of research, he found Carmen Rodriguez, 25 years old, 5th-year student at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, specializing in pediatric cardiac surgery. Without thinking twice, he took his private jet to Mexico City. He found Carmen in the university library, bent over cardiac anatomy books. The resemblance to Sofia was evident. Same dark eyes, same delicate features. When he introduced himself as Sofia's former employer, Carmen's expression became cold and suspicious. She told him Sofia wasn't angry with him. She was destroyed. She had cried for 3 days when she arrived in Mexico City. She had discovered everything he had done, how he had deceived and used her for his cruel games. Ethan begged to know where Sofia was, saying he loved her. Carmen laughed bitterly. That was his way of loving? Making her fall in love while pretending to be paralyzed? Playing with her feelings to test another woman? Ethan sat heavily, crushed by the weight of his guilt. Carmen observed the sincerity of his pain, then told him that if he truly loved Sofia, he should leave her alone. Sofia deserved someone who wouldn't lie to her, wouldn't manipulate her, would treat her with respect from the first moment. Ethan admitted she was right, that Sofia deserved much better than him. He asked only to tell her he was sorrier than words could express, and that if there had been a way to undo what he had done, he would give everything for that possibility. Ethan returned to New York with an even heavier heart. Maybe the most loving thing he could do was precisely leave Sofia alone, allow her to rebuild her life away from the pain he had caused her. But what Ethan didn't know was that Sofia, in her small Mexico City boarding house, had heard every word of the message Carmen had reported to her, and that those words had rekindled in her something she thought she had buried forever. 2 weeks after Ethan's return from Mexico City, life in the Central Park penthouse had become an emotional desert. Ethan worked mechanically, barely ate, slept little. He had dismissed all temporary staff and lived alone in that immense home that once seemed like a symbol of his success and now felt like a golden tomb. Every room reminded him of Sofia. The kitchen where she prepared meals with love, the living room where they had their first real conversations, his bedroom where she had watched over him with infinite dedication while he shamelessly lied about his health condition. It was a gray November morning when the doorbell rang. Ethan found a courier with an express package from Mexico. The sender was Carmen Rodriguez. Inside was a letter and a small object wrapped in tissue paper. The letter was handwritten. Sofia was returning something that belonged to him and had something to tell him, but only if he had truly changed. If interested, Sofia would be the next day at 3 p.m. in Central Park's Bethesda Fountain area, where they had first met. Ethan unwrapped the object, and his heart stopped. It was the small silver cross his mother had given him at 16, the only jewelry of sentimental value he owned. During the week of fake paralysis, he must have lost it, and Sofia had found it. But Sofia said they had met at Bethesda Fountain the first time. Ethan didn't remember ever meeting her there before she started working for him. The next day, he arrived at Central Park an hour early, too nervous to wait. At 3 p.m. sharp, he saw her coming. She wore a simple beige coat, hair loose for the first time since he'd known her, and looked thinner. They stopped at a distance, studying each other. Sofia smiled sadly and began to tell him. It had happened 3 years ago. She had just arrived from Mexico, didn't speak English well, was looking for work. She had seen the ad for housekeeper in his penthouse, but was terrified. She was sitting on that bench crying because she didn't know if she would ever be good enough. Ethan had passed during a morning run. He had stopped, asked if she was okay. She had told him she was Mexican, looking for work, afraid. He had given her a tissue and said courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite fear. Then he had asked if she wanted him to accompany her to the interview, saying he would speak well of her to his boss. He didn't know he was the future boss. Ethan began to remember the foreign girl crying in the park, his impulse to help her. Sofia explained she had fallen in love with him that day, with the kind man who had stopped to help a stranger. But when she started working for him, she saw he had become different, cold, distant, focused only on money. She thought she had been wrong about him. During the week of fake paralysis, she had seen again the man she had fallen in love with 3 years before. Vulnerable, human, capable of real conversations. That's why it hurt even more to discover it was all fake. Ethan stood up from the bench and knelt before her on the damp grass. He solemnly promised he would never lie to her again, that he would treat her like the queen she was, that he would love and respect her every day of his life. If she gave him a chance, he would spend the rest of his days proving she deserved all the love in the world. Sofia looked at him kneeling, this powerful man humbling himself for her love, and felt the wall of pain beginning to crumble. She told him to get up, that people were watching. He replied, he didn't care about people, he only cared about her. She extended her hand to help him up. When they touched, both felt the spark that had always been there. Sofia granted him one chance, just one. At the first lie, it would be over forever. Ethan took her hands, looking at her with intensity that made her heart beat fast. One chance was all he asked, and he would use it to prove that true love existed, and that she deserved it more than anyone else in the world. They kissed in Central Park, at Bethesda Fountain, where they had first met, while November sun painted everything gold around them. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood that true wealth isn't measured in money or property, but in the ability to love and be authentically loved. 2 years later, they married in that same park, before 200 guests including Carmen, now an established cardiac surgeon, and all the penthouse staff. Sofia had maintained her simplicity and kindness. Ethan had learned to be the man Sofia had seen in him from day one, generous, human, capable of loving unconditionally. Every time they passed the Bethesda Fountain during Sunday walks, they stopped to thank destiny. A love born from kindness, grown in truth, bloomed in the second chance we all deserve when love is authentic. Like if you believe true love sees beyond appearances. Comment which moment of the story touched you most. Share to inspire those who believe in second chances. Subscribe for more stories of authentic love and redemption. Sometimes it takes a lie to discover the truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters. And sometimes the greatest love is the one we don't seek, but that finds us when we least expect it. Because true love doesn't look at the bank account, but at the account of the heart.